Angkor Wat meaning. Temple City is a temple complex in Cambodia and is the largest religious monument in the world, on a site measuring 162.6 hectares, 1,626,000 square meters, 402 acres. Breaking from Shiva tradition of previous kings, Angkor Wat was dedicated to Vishnu for the Khmer Empire. It was built by the Khmer king Suryavarman II in the early 12th century in Yasodharapura, Khmer, present-day Angkor, the capital of the Khmer Empire, as his state temple and eventual mausoleum. Breaking from the Shiva tradition of previous kings, Angkor Wat was instead dedicated to Vishnu. Angkor Wat combines two basic plans of Khmer temple architecture, the Temple Mountain and the later Galleried Temple. It is designed to represent Mount Meru, home of the Devas in Hindu mythology, within a moat more than 5 kilometers, 3 miles long and an outer wall 3.6 kilometers, 2.2 miles long or 3 rectangular galleries, each raised above the next. At the center of the temple stands a quincunx of towers. Unlike most Angkorian temples, Angkor Wat is oriented to the west. Scholars are divided as to the significance of this. The temple is admired for the grandeur and harmony of the architecture, its extensive bas-reliefs, and for the numerous devatas adorning its walls. As the best preserved temple at the site, Angkor Wat is the only one to have remained a significant religious center since its foundation. The temple is at the top of the high classical style of Khmer architecture. It is one of the most important pilgrimage sites for Buddhists in Cambodia and around the world, having played a major role in converting Cambodia into a Buddhist nation. It has become a symbol of Cambodia, appearing on its national flag, and as the country's main tourist attraction. Angkor Wat lies 5.5 kilometers, 3 plus half a mile, north of the modern town of Siem Reap, and a short distance south and slightly east of the previous capital, which was centered at Baphuon. In an area of Cambodia where there is an essential group of ancient structures, it is the southernmost of Angkor's main sites. According to a myth, the construction of Angkor Wat was ordered by Indra to serve as a palace for his son Preka Ket Milaya. According to the 13th century Chinese traveler Zhou Daguan, some believed that the temple was constructed in a single night by a divine architect. The Brahmin by the name of Divakarapandita was responsible for urging King Suryavarman II to construct Angkor Wat. The initial design and construction of the temple took place in the first half of the 12th century, during the reign of Suryavarman II, ruled 1113 c. 1150. All of the original religious motifs derived from Hinduism. Breaking from the Shiva tradition of previous kings, Angkor Wat was instead dedicated to Vishnu. It was built as the king's state temple and capital city. As neither the foundation stela nor any contemporary inscriptions referring to the temple have been found, its original name is unknown, but it may have been known as Vara Vishnu Lok, after the presiding deity. Work seems to have ended shortly after the king's death, leaving some of the bas-relief decoration unfinished. The term Vra Vishnuloka or Parama Vishnuloka literally means, the king who has gone to the supreme world of Vishnu, which refer to Suryavarman II posthumously and intend to venerate his glory and memory. In 1177, approximately 27 years after the death of Suryavarman II, Angkor was sacked by the Chams, the traditional enemies of the Khmer. Thereafter the empire was restored by a new king, Jayavarman VII, who established a new capital and state temple, Angkor Thom and the Bayon, respectively, a few kilometers north, dedicated to Buddhism, because the king believed that the Hindu gods had failed him. Angkor Wat was, therefore, also gradually converted into a Buddhist site, and many Hindu sculptures were replaced by Buddhist art. Towards the end of the 12th century, Angkor Wat gradually transformed from a Hindu center of worship to Buddhism, which continues to the present day. Angkor Wat is unusual among the Angkor temples in that although it was largely neglected after the 16th century, it was never completely abandoned. 14 inscriptions dated from the 17th century, discovered in the Angkor area, testify to Japanese Buddhist pilgrims that had established small settlements alongside Khmer locals. At that time, the temple was thought by the Japanese visitors to be the famed Jetavana Garden of the Buddha, which was originally located in the Kingdom of Magadha, India. The best-known inscription tells of Ukondayu Kazufusa, who celebrated the Khmer New Year at Angkor Wat in 1632. One of the first Western visitors to the temple was Antonio da Madalena, a Portuguese friar who visited in 1586 and said that it is of such extraordinary construction that it is not possible to describe it with a pen, particularly since it is like no other building in the world. It has towers and decoration and all the refinements which the human genius can conceive of. In 1622, the poem of Angkor Wat composed in Khmer verse describes the beauty of Angkor Wat and creates a legend around the construction of the complex, supposedly a divine castle built for legendary Khmer king Preah Ket Milaya by Hindu god Preah Pisanukar, or Bra Bisanukar, Vishvakarman, as Suryavarman II had already vanished from people's minds. In 1860, with the help of French missionary Father Charles-Émile Bouilleveau, the temple was effectively rediscovered by the French naturalist and explorer Henri Mouhot, who popularized the site in the West through the publication of travel notes, in which he wrote, "One of these temples, a rival to that of Solomon, and erected by some ancient Michelangelo, might take an honorable place beside our most beautiful buildings. It is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome, and presents a sad contrast to the state of barbarism in which the nation is now plunged." In 1861, German anthropologist Aldov Bastian undertook a 4-year trip to Southeast Asia, and his account of this trip, The People of East Asia, ran to 6 volumes. When Bastian finally published the studies and observations during his journey through Cambodia to Cochinchina in Germany in 1868, told in detail but uninspiredly, above all without a single one of his drawings of the Angkorian sites, this work hardly made an impression, while everyone was talking about Henri Mouhot's posthumous work with vivid descriptions of Angkor, travels in the central parts of Indochina, Siam, Cambodia and Laos, published in 1864 through the Royal Geographical Society. There were no ordinary dwellings or houses or other signs of settlement, including cooking utensils, weapons, or items of clothing usually found at ancient sites. Instead, there is only evidence of the monuments themselves. The artistic legacy of Angkor Wat and other Khmer monuments in the Angkor region led directly to France adopting Cambodia as a protectorate on the 11th of August 1863 and invading Siam to take control of the ruins. This quickly led to Cambodia reclaiming lands in the northwestern corner of the country such as the areas of Siem Reap, Battambang and Sisophon, which were under Siamese rule from 1795 to 1907. Angkor Wat's aesthetics were on display in the plaster cast museum of Louis Delaporte called Musée Indo-Chinois, which existed in the Parisian Trocadero Palace from c. 1880 to the mid-1920s. The 20th century saw a considerable restoration of Angkor Wat. Gradually, teams of laborers and archaeologists pushed back the jungle and exposed the expanses of stone, permitting the sun to once again illuminate the dark corners of the temple. Angkor Wat caught the attention and imagination of a wider audience in Europe when the Pavilion of French Protectorate of Cambodia, as part of French Indochina, recreated the life-size replica of Angkor Wat during Paris Colonial Exposition in 1931. Cambodia gained independence from France on the 9th of November 1953 and has controlled Angkor Wat since that time. It is safe to say that from the colonial period onwards until the site's nomination as UNESCO World Heritage in 1992, this specific temple of Angkor Wat was instrumental in the formation of the modern and gradually globalized concept of built cultural heritage. Restoration work was interrupted by the Cambodian Civil War and Khmer Rouge control of the country during the 1970s and 1980s, but relatively little damage was done during this period. Camping Khmer Rouge forces used whatever wood remained in the building structures for firewood, and a shootout between Khmer Rouge and Vietnamese forces put a few bullet holes in a bas-relief. Far more damage was done after the wars, by art thieves working out of Thailand, which, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, claimed almost every head that could be lopped off the structures, including reconstructions. The temple is a powerful symbol of Cambodia, and is a source of great national pride that has factored into Cambodia's diplomatic relations with France, the United States, and its neighbor Thailand. A depiction of Angkor Wat has been a part of Cambodian national flags since the introduction of the first version circa 1863. From a larger historical and even transcultural perspective, however, the Temple of Angkor Wat did not become a symbol of national pride sui generis but had been inscribed into a larger politico-cultural process of French colonial heritage production in which the original temple site was presented in French colonial and universal exhibitions in Paris and Marseille between 1889 and 1937. In December 2015, it was announced that a research team from University of Sydney had found a previously unseen ensemble of buried towers built and demolished during the construction of Angkor Wat, as well as a massive structure of unknown purpose on its south side and wooden fortifications. The findings also include evidence of low-density residential occupation in the region, with a road grid, ponds, and mounds. These indicate that the temple precinct, bounded by moat and wall, may not have been used exclusively by the priestly elite, as was previously thought. The team used lidar, ground-penetrating radar and targeted excavation to map Angkor Wat.